Let's go to the Nationals leader now, David Littleproud, who joins us from the Victorian city of Bendigo. Good to talk to you, David. One question out of left field, that exchange with Ross Cadell and Bob Katter. You must have seen it on the news today. Not the best behaviour from your senator there?
No, I think what Ross was doing is expressing the frustration by the farmers that we're hearing and consumers that they're getting touched up by these supermarkets. And instead of actually having an adult debate about policy shifts, we get people dressed up in pig suits. I mean, I think people expect more of their politicians to debate this with intellect. And the Nationals have had a clear policy around introducing divestiture powers. And we're garnering support in Canberra for that, not with pig suits, but with intellect. And I've got to say, Peter Dutton and I are working through a proposal now that we want to address competition policy where supermarkets have too much power and we have transparency from the farm gate to your plate. That's what Australians want. That's what Peter Dutton and I are working through. And if Bob Katter and Andrew G want to get dressed up in pig suits and belittle that, then good luck to them. I'd rather be talking to the adults in the room and making effective change about putting downward pressure at the supermarket by putting pressure on the supermarkets themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right about the pig suits. So I don't think we need them, but I don't think we need people heckling from the sidelines of press conferences either. Speaking about farmers and frustration, you would have heard a lot in Bendigo and surrounds from people who are very concerned about renewable energy projects and associated transmission lines going on. Are these people going to get a hearing? Do they have any power at all to stop the energy companies and the energy authorities just trampling across their land?
No, they're not, because Chris Bowen's trying to do all this by 2030 and we're expendable. We're bearing the brunt of this without any consultation. And what Peter Dutton and I are working through on nuclear energy is making sure that we bring communities with them, that they have a say, particularly where those coal-fired power stations already are. That's leadership. That's courage of your conviction to go into the community and saying there's a better way. But what we're seeing here is that these communities are seeing prime agricultural land ripped up, your food security being ripped up, but we're actually also destroying the very thing we're trying to protect, the natural environment. So renewable projects have lost their social licence in this country because of this reckless race to 82% renewables by 2030. And what we're also doing is having concentration risk. Now, I'm not an educated man, but in grade 8, I learned about concentration risk in business economics. And if you put all your energy eggs in one basket, you are opening our country up to significant sovereign risk. And even here in Victoria, only a couple of months ago, we saw that what happened when transmission lines get knocked over from large storms. And what this government wants to do is put another 28,000 kilometres of them. So you actually expose yourself to even greater risk in your reliability of your grid by putting a greater risk of having more transmission lines when there is a sensible way to do this. And this is about courage of leadership. And the Prime Minister won't debate Peter Dutton about nuclear energy. In fact, I offered, when I became Nationals leader, to the Prime Minister to say, let's have a National Energy Summit. Let's bring premiers. Premier Malinakis actually agrees with nuclear energy. The unions, the AWU, are in favour of it, and the experts together to make sure we get an energy mix, whether that's coal and gas with carbon capture storage, complemented with nuclear and renewables, so that to a point where we're not got a concentration risk that we've got now. And I think we need to pause and to plan and to get this right. We've got sovereignty of all our resources. Why wouldn't we show leadership and courage of our conviction and bring the Australian people with us, not show contempt that we know it all? And I think the Australian people need to make some pretty tough decisions about what their energy is going to look like into the future. We should have a uniquely Australian way to it, and Peter Dutton and I are committed to that. And I've got to say, Peter Dutton's the first Liberal leader to have the courage to take the Nationals' hand on nuclear, and I think that says a lot about his character and the person that Peter Dutton is.
Yeah, it's certainly a debate that this country's got to confront. We've been pussyfooting around on it since the 1970s, and he's showing a lot of leadership there. I want to get you on another issue of the day, another big political issue of the day, and it relates to aged care and possible reforms. The government's talked a lot today. They haven't really told us what they're going to do. Here's the aged care minister, Annika Wells.
I mean, there were 22 reports into aged care under the previous government. This really is the funding of aged care, a can that has been long kicked down the road. It has been something that has been put off for decades and decades by government, but this is a government that is taking it on.
Yeah, they're taking it on, David. They're saying that they're going to make sure wealthy people pay more but they're not explaining to us how they're going to do that. And now that wealthy people paying more, most people nod their heads at that, but it all depends on how they pay and where you draw the line as to who's wealthy and who's not.
Yeah, exactly. And the devil's always in the detail, but we want to be constructive. And in fact, we did shift the dial in giving more per bed per night to those residents, and particularly in rural and remote areas where you don't have the market tension. And I think you need to look at it through that lens. But I don't think you can look at aged care in isolation to the NDIS, because much of the challenges that you're facing in aged care comes from the overinflated NDIS and the payments that are being made to some of the providers there that are putting pressure on aged care. And so I think we need to look at this in totality and make sure that we look at sensible reforms also in the NDIS. And we made it clear even before the election that we were up for reforming the NDIS. Bill Shorten said, no, everyone's got to have a prize. Well, there is a limit that we can support as Australian taxpayers. We need to make sure the most vulnerable are looked after, but we need to look at that not in isolation, but looked at aged care, because the care sector is under stress, and they're under stress from not just the pressures in aged care, but also with the NDIS. And I think as legislators, this is really where we need a bipartisan approach. Be honest with the Australian people about what we can afford, what we can do to make sure that we can age in place, but also give that NDIS to the most vulnerable to what they deserve.